scary and sometimes hard, like you got a winning hand and then you dealt the wrong card. It ain't fair, but you're not alone. You're down and out and you're high and dry in the darkest valley or the coldest night. You'll find 'cause you're not alone. With this song bubbling in your heart, a story is gonna give you a brand new start. You don't have to tackle this big bad world all on your own. It's better we do it together. All mixed up and upside down, feels like there's no one else around, but it right. You're not alone. When it all goes south and life gets tough and you've been knocked down and the weeds are rough, you just fight, fight, fight. You're not alone. With a song bubbling in your soul, and a story is gonna make you whole. You don't have to travel this big bad world all on your own, 'cause it's better when we do it together. Yeah, it's better when we do it together. Well, hello everybody. How are we doing today? Happy Sunday. Guys, as I reach out of the frame to put my guitar away. Guys, I've got a fun, wow, is it fun? Is the word fun the word I would use, the adjective I would use to describe today's Polaha Chautauqua? Regardless, this is the Polaha Chautauqua. I am your host, Kristoffer Polaha. I'm coming to you live from sunny, beautiful California, Southern California, where there's another heat wave. It's hot today. It's close to 100 degrees, or at least it feels like it. This semester, so last week was a little crazy. I was on set. It was all run and gun. I showed you guys what it was like to be shooting on a small set for a short film, Reggie Austin's movie, The Marked. You can go check stuff out at The Marked, hashtag The Marked short film. It did not give us a chance to really dive deep and engage and continue the conversation, which is about the character of Christ and how we are made in God's image. Not every Sunday is going to be a direct attack on that conversation. And by that I mean, not every Sunday am I going to whip out the Bible and are we going to study the character of Christ and then discuss how we're created in that image. Sometimes I'm going to bring on people who are doing the work, who are reflective of Christ's character, whether or not they're Christian, I don't know, but what they're doing in the world and the effect they're having in the world is Christ-like. So what does it mean to be Christ-like? And again, what does that mean to be made in God's image, the character of Christ, and how do we reflect that? I'm bringing on a really special guest today who I think is doing that. The walk that she's walking is massively impressive, and the change that she's making in the world for good is truly incredible and inspiring. She is the CEO of the National Center of Sexual Exploitation. So that's, for short, it's NCOSE. And I'm gonna grab the website. Her name is Dawn Hawkins. And it's endsexualexploitation.org. So I want you to pin that. Somebody go ahead and pin that. And as soon as this Chautauqua is over, I want you guys to go look at the website and look at what's happening. The issues they cover are child sexual abuse, pornography, sexual trafficking, the demand for sexual trafficking and prostitution. They also deal with prostitution as an issue, and then, of course, sexual violence. This is a conversation that is being continued throughout the Polaha Chautauqua. It started last fall when someone came on and bravely told their story about being raped and about what that was like to be somebody who went from being a victim to changing their narrative and became a survivor, and how they changed their narrative and empowered themselves with this thing. The reason I like talking about things like this, and I know that's a weird, again, way to frame, why would you like talking about this kind of stuff? But I love when God uses evil and is able to break through the evil and turn it into good. I love when stories are turned on their head. So what evil tries to use and destroy us and kill us with, God will turn it into something powerful and beautiful and profound. And when we take hold of our narratives and change them and turn them into something incredible, there's no greater power, there's no greater way to use story. And my next guest is somebody who is changing people's stories left and right. And I'm going to bring her on. Let me see. I'm going to invite. So, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to Dawn Hawkins, the CEO of the National Center of Sexual Exploitation. Hi, Dawn.
Hi, there you are.
There you are. That was a perfect introduction. As I was introducing you, like as soon as I finished, your face popped up. That was perfect timing. How are you?
Good. You were probably going to hear my crazy kids, but I'm really good. Sundays are lovely.
Thank you for spending your Sunday evening. You're on the East Coast right now. So it's like right in the center. You got bedtime, dinner. You're taking very precious time to be with us today, and I'm super grateful for that. Thank you.
Wonderful to be with all of you.
So last spring we talked to Jake, who is a co-worker of with you. And he and I had a really incredible conversation, but conversation was born out of a conversation you and I had with my wife and with Javier and Ann at dinner here in California. And the stuff that you were telling me about was truly mind-blowing. Like because my entry into sort of talking about sexual exploitation, talking about sex trafficking, talking about violence against women, really was born out of my participation with the Jensen Project. And so I was sort of being educated and sort of learning, and I never understood the depths of how dark the violence goes and sexual trafficking and how dark all of it really is. And so you and I had this really incredible conversation, again, with my wife and with the La Fianzas. And one of the things, and we could talk about anything. I have a couple questions for you, but I really want to give you the ball and let you just discuss, because as we know, the more people know about this stuff and the more they talk about it and the more eyeballs and ears that we can reach, the more change can be made. But one of the things you told me about was that you guys hired some lawyers. And so all of a sudden there was real, like in the court of law, real effects happening. So I do want to talk about that today as well.
Okay, sounds good.
I'm going to open up with a question. If you had a top concern right now, if you noticed a trend, whether it's on social media or on the television, like in our movies or our TV shows, something that just you're seeing it and it alarms you, being in the position that you're in, what would you say like your top concerns are right now?
Ooh, good one. Thanks for throwing that up. I would say one of the biggest concerns I have is the role that big tech is playing in facilitating sexual abuse and exploitation. They have largely kind of shirked responsibility for their role in enabling sexual abuse and exploitation. And so what we're seeing as a result is just the proliferation of exploitation of our youth online. It is so easy for predators to target our youth online. And it's just because there are basic flaws in the way that social media companies in particular have built their platforms. They knew kids were going to be on it, but they have not created barely any safety measures to help our kids. Another problem we're seeing is that a lot of individuals are being either they're being sexually assaulted or abused, and that assault is being filmed and recorded, and it's being uploaded to many websites, social media as well, even just mainstream sites. And this abuse that's filmed and then shared just causes so much trauma. It's so hard for them to move on. So I would say one of the things I'm the most concerned about is in bringing big tech along as a partner in curbing sexual abuse and exploitation and helping them see how they can sincerely help to decrease the problem and help survivors tremendously.
And you guys at NCOSE have an interesting tool. You have like a shame list, is that right? Like if there's a company and they just repeatedly are basically facilitating pornography or sexual trafficking or sexual abuse, and help exploiting that, you have a list, right, that you put them on?
We do. We are known for the Dirty Dozen list, which we release every year. Nobody wants to be on it. And because of that list, many companies have changed. And this list, Kristoffer, has, I can't believe what an impact it has. But we name mainstream companies to this list and explain how they're participating in sexual abuse and exploitation. Sometimes they're profiting from it. And then we invite tons of people who are concerned about these issues to just send emails to the executive leaders of these companies, and they listen and they change. Just like we've had many successes, but one that I am really excited about is Google Chromebooks. So for 5 years or so, we were fighting Google to turn on default filters for all of the Chromebooks that are used in our schools that kids are getting. And they said, no. And they already have this ability to turn on. It's just too complicated for parents and, school administrators to figure out.
Yeah, like every single computer, right?
Exactly.
Default, right.
And so during COVID, we really went after Google together with thousands of moms and dads and teachers sending messages. And last year, September, it was September 1st, it's been a year now, with just one update, all of the Chromebooks used in our schools worldwide suddenly defaulted to safety. It's because so many people joined together.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Now I wonder, as a parent, if you're sitting there, like mom and dad, or just concerned, like good person, adult, are you even aware of the danger that happens when a kid, because you're thinking, hey, a computer, my kid's getting a computer at school, that's a big deal. That's a financial hardship for us, and we just feel so blessed to have a computer. But then all of a sudden the kids, my kid, I remember, so Julianne she was folding some laundry and she was putting some stuff away for Micah, and he was this must have been second grade, and I was standing in the doorway. And I remember kind of talking to her, and I looked over at him, and he had his little laptop on his computer, and he was super into sharks. He loved sharks. And he was looking up something that had to do with sharks. And I could tell you what it is, but I don't want to, because I don't want to perpetuate the website or whatever. But he typed the most innocuous, innocent two words. One was shark, and the other one was where sharks would play. And all of a sudden, it was animated porn. And the look on his face gave me sent off the alarms for me, and I happened to be in the room while it was happening, so it was all real time. Okay. And I looked at Micah's little face and I was like, hey buddy, what happened? And he shut the computer real slow, and I went over and I sat down next to him and I opened it up and I said, what happened? What'd you find? And we looked, and he thought it was a cute, there was, he's a second grader, he thought there was a girl eating a cucumber. He didn't know what was going on, but the fact that it was so easy and it was targeted for children. It was literally, it was a cartoon targeted for children, and the plug words had nothing to do with anything sexual at all, at all. And so it was this booby trap. And so Julianne and I immediately were like, all right, this is a danger zone. So we've always been hyper protective of our kids online. But when you say that big tech is the biggest issue, you had told me a few stories about party supplies on Amazon, and you go to buy one thing and all of a sudden there's a blow up doll, and it's the size of a kid or whatever. And you're like, why is that on Amazon? Why is Amazon selling sexual toys and they're placed right next to party favors? So why are things happening the way they're happening? You told me a story. I don't know if you feel comfortable sharing it, but the one about the Twitter, about the kid, is that too personal to share on public? Can you do that on public?
Sure. I think the one I told you is our lawsuit against Twitter, actually. So unfortunately, we know two young boys who were trafficked. They were targeted on social media by someone who they thought was another teenage girl, and they unfortunately were trafficked. They were abused and exploited, and that abuse was filmed. They were 13 years old when that happened. When they were 15, they thought they had finally gotten out, moved on. When they were 15, the trafficker uploaded a compilation video of tons of their abuse to Twitter. Unfortunately, so many kids at school saw it. They were sharing it. These boys became so distraught. One of them became suicidal by just a miracle. One student told their parents. The parents reached out to the boys' moms. They were able to try to get help. But these young boys went to Twitter themselves. They begged Twitter to take this down. They even uploaded pictures, screens. Twitter said, prove to us that you're a kid. And they uploaded screenshots of their IDs, which showed they were just 15 at the time, at that moment, even though the abuse had happened when they were even younger.
Yeah.
And Twitter wrote back and said, this does not violate our community standards and we're going to leave it up. These, the families became distraught. Thankfully, after I think about 9 days, through like a friend at church, they were able to get connected to someone at Homeland Security who reached out and just helped. But, so many of us don't have those friends.
Right. We don't have those resources.
Exactly. And they got it down, but only in minimum, I think by day 2 or 3, it already had almost 300,000 views on these images. And of course there's like endless amounts of downloads that could happen. So you mentioned the attorneys we hired. We started a law center because we've been going after these companies for many years. We've been asking them to change, and some are changing, but frankly, it's just too slow. And thousands of kids and adults also are suffering because of it. And so we decided we're going to start suing them. We're going to go after their bottom line. And the beautiful thing is that we're winning. So that case against Twitter has moved forward. It's before the 9th Circuit Court of Appeals on their appeal, because this is the first case ever that on anything that has been able to move forward in a lawsuit against Twitter.
That's amazing. And I think that needs to be repeated. This is the first case in ever that is being pushed for, like, that you guys are heading towards victory against Twitter, which is massive. Like, that's huge.
And this is incredible justice for these young boys and their families. But then it will also lead to systemic change. Because of this lawsuit against Twitter, we're seeing like many of the other platforms, like because of the threat of lawsuits, they're starting to change. Just some really good news. Like last Monday, Apple rolled out some phenomenal parental controls. It used to take 31 steps for us to turn on the parental controls on an Apple device. And last week they announced if you just turn on family pairing with your kid's iPhone or tablet, you can automatically default all the safety settings to on. TikTok and Instagram and Snapchat have also likewise deployed some new features that are really helpful.
That's amazing. So you're seeing real world effects, which has to feel really, really good.
Good. It feels good most of the time, but sometimes I'm like, why do we have to fight so hard?
Right. What do you think? What would be the number one thing that you want people to know? So if you're out and you're talking to people who are not aware of all the dangers and all of the footholds and all of the little strongholds that people, like, I gotta be honest with you, I'm a grown man. And when I'm on Twitter, when I'm on Instagram, if I hit the wrong keyword and all of a sudden an image, of like some provocative, sexy image shows up, it triggers that thing in you that's like everyone lusts a little. Like you kind of do that thing and you're like, and you have to have self-discipline and you have to have self-control to be like, all right, I'm just not going to look. But if you're a kid and you don't have that self-control or that self-discipline, it's so easy to slip. So why are these public spaces? It's easier to get pornography today than it ever has been in the history of the world. It's easier to see, and pornography, obviously you and I can have this conversation, we probably should. Fundamentally, pornography is evil and it objectifies women and it reduces women to objects and it makes men think that women aren't. So all of a sudden they've gone from being a thou, which is something you're in a relationship with, to an it. And I think that all of the things that you're doing, like I would love to see Twitter, if it's a public space, Instagram's a public space, Facebook is a public space. It should feel like we're at the mall. It should feel like, and those dark corners shouldn't exist on them,
Agreed. And so I come before you tonight saying I feel full of hope that finally, after I've been fighting this fight for a little more than 10 years, and it feels like finally we're turning a corner and those dark spaces are finally being threatened by the light. You had asked me kind of what if I could say to someone what's most important. I can't pick one. I'm gonna say 2. So for the youth in your life, for the kids in your life, unfortunately, like this stuff is coming for them. They don't even have to look at it. And just like you commented, their brains are not ready. They can't handle it. They can't make those decisions. So my plea to parents and caregivers and anyone with children in their lives is to help prepare them. You can, you want to try to protect them and stop it, but you can't in today's world. So you have to help prepare them for those innocent searches that are going to lead to icky stuff, or for the yucky, like icky, tricky strangers who send them messages. So that's number one. And number two, I would say, I want you all to realize that we can stand up and we can change this. And I found in my experience that almost every time we raise our voice to say like no to sexual abuse and exploitation, we're winning. We're making considerable progress. So, we don't have to just accept the darkness and those corners that exist.
Right. I love that. Would you say, like, what does it sort of like blow your mind that right now, I'm from Nevada, and prostitution has always been legal in Nevada, outside of like Washoe County, and I think outside of Clark County, maybe in Vegas. Like you had to go outside of those big city areas, but then all of a sudden there were Mustang Ranch, there was the cat houses and the whorehouses, and but now I'm hearing that other states are plugging for legalized prostitution. And what is your take on that? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah. Well, one piece of good news is we are suing the state of Nevada, and we're arguing a really interesting law that they are infringing on the 13th Amendment by allowing involuntary servitude in their state. And it's interesting. It's going forward in a pretty positive way. So that is, we'll see, it's winding through the courts there. But because the problem is that when prostitution is legalized, sex trafficking explodes. Like we totally normalize the sex trade. And as a result, the demand increases tremendously. So many people are flocking to the state of Nevada, thinking that it's okay to buy someone for sex. And in order to keep up with that demand, more and more vulnerable individuals are being pushed into the sex trade. And that is what will happen in any other area. It's what does happen when it's legalized or decriminalized. So,
Yeah.
So we are actively really working. That's how I got to know you, is we're working with the foundation you're on the board of, to stop the full decriminalization of prostitution in a number of states. And so far we've won in every state. They have not passed it, but it's a growing fight. And it's so important because, look, if we decriminalize sex buying, pimping, and brothel keeping, which is what they're trying to do, the amount of exploitation will explode. The impact on kids, as well as like tons of other crimes that happen just related to prostitution. Things like increased drugs, increased child endangerment, child exploitation. All of that increases wherever the commercial sex trade is exploding.
Yeah. I mean, you want to go down a dark rabbit hole. You get young 13, 14, 15-year-old girls who don't have good families, who come from broken homes. You give them a support system and just like a gang would, a false sense of community. And then say those girls get pregnant, and now you've got these babies then that'll be raised up. If it's legal, then you've got you'll have generational if you look down that rabbit hole, 50 years, it could be it's a really terrifying prospect. So I think ending prostitution is essential. What about when I'm walking through the Los Angeles airport, you've got the football players on these bright yellow posters that are saying, if there's a child with an adult, ask the question, and the kid if it doesn't look right, speak into it. And it's like these anti-sex trafficking. So what is that about? Like, what's happening in our country and our kids just being stolen? Like, what is that? Because I know that there's the weird Pizzagate stuff where everyone's like, conspiracy theory, but then there's actual things happening. Like, I know Ohio's like an epicenter of, like, what's going on? Like, what's happening to our women?
Well, the reality is that sex trafficking is happening all over the place. It's not just happening in third world countries or to individuals who are from third world countries coming here. It's happening in the suburbs, in wealthy neighborhoods. It's happening especially to vulnerable populations, minority populations, LGBTQ youth especially are being pulled into it. I'm so happy about those signs now that are all over, because finally we're waking up and talking about how this is actually happening right in our backyards. And we're equipping other people to help be part of the solution and recognizing it. I will say, though, we will not solve the problem. We will never solve the problem if all we're trying to do is rescue. We have to stop that demand side. There would be no sex trafficking. There would be no sexual exploitation if there weren't people who think it's okay to buy and use others for sex and
Right.
sexual gratification.
And what does that look like? What are you guys doing to like up the stakes of, it's illegal, if you're a woman, it's illegal to stand in the corner, you'll get arrested for prostitution, but the dude who's in the car can just drive off. So how do we flip that? So like if the dude shows up in the car, the cop's like, hey brother, and is there a dirty dozen list for dudes who are like, I mean, what can we do?
Thank you. Well, there's so much. You know, we believe that the women and the youth who are being prostituted and trafficked, they need help and services. They should not be treated as criminals. And so we need to start to shift the like response by law enforcement to this, to not arrest the victims, but instead to, like you just said, like knock on the window and arrest the buyers and the traffickers and go after them. And what we're finding is that when sex buyers feel like they might be under threat of getting caught by the police or anybody finding out about what they're engaged in, they stop. Many of them stop. The demand goes significantly down just with the threat of being caught. So NCOSE, our organization, is really involved in trying to shift the legislation, the laws in the states to have more accountability on buyers. And then we're coming to talk with you and all of these people who are listening to help them understand, if you want to solve sex trafficking, you have to help those who are being harmed, but we also have to stop those who are doing the harm.
Exactly. Yeah, because if the dude, your average Joe, thinks it's very normal, the more normalized it becomes, right? Then the average Joe's like, well, I mean, I'm not.
Then there's no barrier.
Yeah. We're not talking about rapists and like the pedophiles in the old creepy sense of the word. We're talking about like the dude that you work with and the guys that you're like buddies with, and they're like, they don't think that it's a big deal, but really what's happening is they're partaking in sex trafficking. I mean, it's like.
Exactly. And I'm not trying to defend the sex buyer here, but I think also they've been tricked too by the lies that like prostitution is just sex work. It's something that individuals are like consenting to, which is so far from the truth. I mean, that's just that term sex work is just trying to completely like normalize what's really happening, which is often extreme sexual violence. And so, by also speaking about these things, talking to the boys in your life, especially younger ages, about, treating individuals with dignity. We all have this innate human dignity. You talked about kind of being made in the image of Christ. Well, we have this like natural, this human dignity that can't be taken away.
Yeah, and that's reflective of the maker of the universe. Yeah. Like
exactly.
We're all bearers of light, of God's light. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
One of the conversations we had, and it was brought to my attention in a conversation with either you or maybe it just might have been with Javier, was that these women who are brought into the sex trafficking, like their credit cards are taken, their IDs are taken, so that when they're used up and and then they're probably put on drugs or they become addicted to drugs in some sort of way. So when their bodies get used up and they're kicked back into the world by these pimps, their credit is destroyed. They have no form of identification. They can't get housing. They can't get jobs. They have no way of reentry. So not only are they dealing with the spiritual bondage that comes with violation, like it is I'm sorry that I should have put a trigger warning on this show, because I know there's a lot of people who have had something happen to them and talk of it. It sort of triggers everything again. And I apologize. I should have put a trigger warning on the top of it, and I will when I post this thing out. But being molested or having sexual violence done on a person, it's one of the strangest things because it has a lasting impact. Yeah. And you could be an 80-year-old person and still have these flashbacks of when you were raped by your father or whatever that awful thing that happened was, and the ramifications, you can see it in a life of domino effects where you're like, whoa. So there has to be a cleansing, and that spiritual cleansing. And if you are a person and you can't even get a job or an apartment or credit, there's no way to get your life back. So then it's just, I can imagine that you're swallowed up by this darkness. So what you guys are doing, And there are so many groups out there in America right now. You know, being a part of the Jensen Foundation, it's opened my eyes on how many small organizations and non-for-profits are out there to help. That's encouraging, but it really is where I'm really glad that you're here talking is the work that you're doing to stop it and to litigate and to hit the bottom line and to shame in a way that's like, hey, there's consequences. If you want to play in this sandbox, you know, you got to know that you're putting glass in it and you're hurting other people. And let's talk about that.
Yes, yes, exactly. Um, I just want to tell you happy things tonight. I'm feeling in a happy mood today.
Good. Talk to me about some joy. Give me some.
You're commenting on how difficult it is to move forward in life, and there are ripple effects in it. Prostitution, exploitation, and abuse, all of that, it causes lifelong trauma. And but I want to say that recently, just this year, a number of survivors got together. They came to Capitol Hill with us and some of our allies, and they told Congress how hard it was to move on because of the debt that they incurred forced by their traffickers. And they got Congress to pass the Debt Bondage Repair Act. And now when a survivor proves that they were trafficked, a whole host of types of debt will be erased from their record. It's just
when did this get passed?
It did, and the president signed it into law.
It just got passed.
Just a couple months ago.
Oh, that's amazing. That's huge.
Yeah, see, this is what happens is as we start to understand these issues more and we speak up, we join together, especially when we we follow what survivors know needs to happen. Like miracles are happening, mountains are moving. There's so much hope here despite the darkness.
Yeah, that's amazing. I was gonna say, I have a question for you. I can't even read my. Your number one proudest moment. Okay, so you're the CEO. That's a big deal. First off, like you're the top banana. And what is in the 10 years you've been working with the COSE? What would you say is your proudest moment?
Ooh.
Is it hard to kind of winnow it down to one?
Yes. But I'll say, right before COVID, I was meeting with some youth who were trafficked in Washington, D.C., and the oldest was 13 years old. It was one of the hardest, most eye-opening experiences of my life to just sit with these young kids and hear what they've gone through. They knew that we name these corporations and we shame them. And so they heard about that and they told the woman who helps them, through their recovery process that they wanted to meet with us. So we went over and met with them, and they showed us how they were being targeted on Snapchat, Twitter, Instagram. And while I was meeting with them, they were getting DMs from the most disgusting things. It was so heartbreaking. And I'm telling you, I had nightmares after this for a while. I then went and talked to other service providers who serve youth, and I found out almost all of their youth were being sold on Instagram, right out in the open. And so we went to Instagram. We started a campaign calling them out for what was happening. Let me back up and say I also went to church groups around the country, and we had different focus groups, and we asked youth who were active in church every Sunday, have you received nude images from strangers online? Almost 100% of the youth said yes. Have you been asked to send nude images? Have you seen pornography? Almost all of the youth active in the church said yes. And so I knew it wasn't just an outlier of those kind of who are being trafficked. It's happening across the board to all of our youth. Yeah. So we went to Instagram. We started meeting with them. The youth started meeting with them, told them what happened. And, over then COVID and through COVID, it got worse for a lot of youth on these social media platforms. Sure. But then Instagram made massive changes. And now if you are under age 15, 16 on Instagram, you no longer can receive direct messages from strangers who you don't already know on the platform. which is
Follow you. You don't
so
follow me.
wonderful. It's wonderful they heard these youth. It's wonderful. Like seeing that whole process was just so awe-inspiring, and that in a huge like mega behemoth company like Instagram would care and would change. So
I love it. Where are you from? Where were you born and raised?
I'm from Colorado.
Colorado. And how were you called into this line of work? Like what happened?
Oh,
Like all of a sudden you're like, all right, I'm doing this.
no, it was. So I am driven by my faith. Our organization is not a faith-based organization expressly, but I'm here because I lived in Europe, in Hungary and Germany, and I felt like God was telling me in those quiet moments somehow I needed to fight for human dignity and oppose pornography and exploitation. And so I came home to the US and just tried to find a way. So here I am.
Rolled your sleeves up and you got on it. It's amazing. It's really impressive. Your recent victories and your progress you mentioned, and if you guys, again, I can't encourage you enough after the end of this show, and I'll post it on the when I tag you, but to go to this site. It's the site is endsexualexploitation.org, and you could go and look at the top issues. You can look at the resources that are available. There's ways to get involved. There's an action center, and you can join the coalition. You can even have a career or get an internship, right?
Yeah. Oh, really important. We host a big global summit, and it's in 1 month, November 8th through the 10th, and it's free and it's online. So I encourage you all to come.
Okay.
It's endexploitationsummit.com.
Okay.
So.
What is it?
Endexploitationsummit.com.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to do that. I got the email for that. And I was going to ask you if it was in person or it's virtual. So it's virtual. I can just do it from
Virtual again this year. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
That's awesome. Yeah, someone just said, other than money, other ways to get involved, go to endsexualexploitation.org, and there are ways to get involved. Yeah, it's amazing what you're doing. Is there anything you want to add? Anything I didn't ask that you're like, oh, I have to say this before I go? I want to keep it. I want to respect your time, because I know it's 7:30. Like I know you've got bedtime and all of the stuff. And is there anything you want to add?
I would say, I'm here to help you, and I hope you don't feel so overwhelmed. I have felt that before, and we, as we join together and we stand up to oppose sexual abuse and exploitation wherever we see it, the world will get better in this way. So whether it's in our homes or our communities or on a national level. So I just want you to feel the hope, and that there's lots to do other than just sharing something on social media. So.
Yeah. Have you ever read The Road by Cormac McCarthy?
No. Is it a good one?
Well, it's a dark one. It's about the end of times, basically this apocalyptic sort of America. The electricity's out, there's no color, and there's a father and a son. It was actually made into a movie with Viggo Mortensen. But The Road, Cormac McCarthy's his prose are so beautiful, and he talks about bearers of light. Father gives his life for his son so that his son can move forward and be a light bearer. And I think it's people like you who acknowledge that there's dignity in the human soul, and who acknowledge that there are struggles in the human condition, but that victory can be had, and that good is at hand, and that there is light to be carried and bared into the darkness. It's people like you who really do change the world. So I'm so grateful, Dawn, that you were able to join me today on the Chautauqua. And please come back. It's a long conversation. So if there's ever anything that you're like, I wish that we had said, you have an open door invitation. I love hearing what you guys are accomplishing, and I love being involved, and I will, find ways to get even more so. So thanks, Dawn.
Thank you. Goodbye, everyone.
All right, we're saying goodbye to Dawn. Bye, Dawn. Okay, that was awesome, guys. There we go. That was the show. That's it, you guys. That's all I got for you. I'm gonna go live with the subscribers. We're gonna talk for a little bit, but I just want to thank Dawn again, and everybody at NCOSE, the National Center of Sexual Exploitation, for what the work that they're doing, the lawyers who are litigating, all of the volunteers and all of the careerists out there who are doing the work. it really is impressive, and huge changes are happening. So that's amazing. And I'm going to pray for you all. Lord Jesus, I lift up this community. I've got a lot of souls watching right now, and more so that will be tuning in after the fact. And I pray that if you were here right now, you were supposed to be here, that God has appointed this meeting, that you are here for a reason. And I pray for your life. I pray for health. I speak health into your life. I speak blessings into your life. I speak encouragement, and that Jesus, that your love will just move through these people, that you will give them hope and help them to feel your salvation and to know that you are the God of the universe, and that you know them by name, and that you knew them when you knitted them together in their mother's wombs, and that you love them, that they're loved beyond measure. I pray that you could take that love and move through the world with it and bring the kingdom of heaven right here on earth as you're walking through the day. That you will be slow to anger, that you will be patient, kind, and loving, that you'll be filled with joy, and that a fragrance will effuse off of you and attract the world. God is good. Thank you guys for watching. Bye-bye. Amen. Bye.